Okay, now that we know how to do custom subnet masks, now we can move on to the subnetting part. And so when we do the subnetting, what we're doing is we're creating ranges. Um, and so we always have to do the custom subnet part before we can move on to the ranges because we have to know what to count by. So if we go ahead and come up here and just take a look at our problem, we can see, similar to one of the first problems we did, that we're going to need 14 subnets and 14 usable hosts again. And so we have a network address of 192.10.10.0. We know that that is a Class C address. We know that the default subnet mask for a Class C address is 255.255.255.0. So then we're going to solve for the rest of the problem. So over on this right side over here, we can see that we are going to solve the problem. We're going to draw our quote unquote great divide line between the two 16s because that will meet our criteria of 14. And then we can fill in the rest of the problem because we know from over here that we have a total of 16 subnets. We know that we have 16 total hosts. We know that when we go in and we subtract 2, that's going to leave us with 14 total hosts, or usable addresses, excuse me, or usable host addresses. And if we count, we used 1, 2, 3, 4 of the bits from the host portion. And so if we add up the binary value of those bits, 128 plus 64 plus 32 plus 16, gives us the 240 in our custom subnet mask. So even when we're subnetting, we still have to solve the custom portion of that. Now what we need to do is we need to be able to range it out. And so it looks somewhat simple to people when they look over here and see that they've got ranges created, but how did they create those? Well, the very first thing that you need to know is that the binary value of the last bit borrowed is what you count by. And so what does she mean when she says count by? Well, this is the binary value of the last bit that I borrowed from the host portion. It's a 16. So that means when I create my network ranges, my address ranges, I'm counting by 16s. So you start by writing the network address out, and our network address is 192.10.10.0. So that's what we write out first. So what do I add to 0 to get 16? I mean, if I'm counting by 16s, what is my end result going to be? It's going to be 15. So I write out 192.10.10.15 because 0 to 15 gives me 16. So this address right here, whoops, this is your network address. So I'm just going to put network ADDI. This address is your broadcast address. So I'll put broad ADDI. Okay, so I want you to look over here on the left side. It says, what is the fourth subnet range? I never talk about subnet ranges. I always say network address range. So what's the range for my network? One in this case. So you have to go through first of all, and you're going to have to range this all out. And I always tell students, range it out as far as you need to go. So I always quickly scan over here. I've got the 4th. Here I have the 8th. Here I have the 13th, and here I have the 9th. So that means I'm going to have to subnet it out to the 13th subnet. Actually the 12th because it's one less. So You start with subnet 0. We said that at the beginning. You start numbering your subnets with 0. So 0 to 15 is 0. 16 to 31 is 1. 32 to 47 is 2. 48 to 63 is 3. 64 to 79 is 4. What I want you to realize here, our network addresses are always even numbers. Broadcast addresses, always odd. Something else to consider is when you're working with these, your usable space is whatever is in between. So this is my usable address space. And so for me, I always like to write it out. That's up to you. You're not required to. But my usable space is always one more than the network. So here it's .1 and one less than the broadcast. So it's going to go to .14. This one is going to be one more. So .17. 2, 1 less is .30. One more, 33, one less, 46. So I just want to point that out to you because it's maybe going to be helpful as you go over here to solve your problem. So the farthest you can range anything out is to 255 because that's as far as you can go, right? We only have 255 bits to be able to work with. So once you're to 255, you're either done or you have to cross over into your network side to be able to, not your network side, but cross over to the next bit to be able to keep working. So if we're going to solve this, it says what is the fourth subnet range? Again, I'm saying what's the network range? So fourth, 0 is 1, 1 is 2, 2 is 3, 3 is 4. So my fourth range is 192.10.10.48 to 192.10.10.63. And you'll notice that that's what we fill in right here. What is the 8th subnet? Again, you guys, subnet number, we're talking network here. What's the network address? So we go down to the 8th, which is actually the 7th, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, I need 8. So it goes to 7. So the network address is the first address in your network range. First address in your network range is the network address. So 192.10.10.112. Then we're taking a look at the broadcast address. The broadcast address is the 13th subnet, which would be the 12th range. Let me get another color going here. That would be the 12th range. Here is your broadcast address. Again, you can see that's what they filled in right here. 192.10.10.207. And then finally, what are the assignable addresses? Your assignable addresses are what you can use. They're your usable addresses. So in the 9th range, that would actually be number 8, right? But I need to know in number 8 what is usable. What is usable? So one more than the network would be a .129. One less than the broadcast would be a 142. So that's what's usable. And so that is what you're filling in the usable side. So that's just kind of a basic, quick overview of how subnetting works. You solve the custom mask first, and then you figure out what your ranges are so that you can assign things to the interfaces. And again down here it says the first address in each subnet range is the subnet number, or we called it the network address. And the last address in the range is the broadcast address. So we count by the binary value of the last bit we borrowed. The first address is the network address, the last address is the broadcast address. And those two addresses cannot be assigned to an interface. That's why up here we're subtracting 2. Okay, so let's try one more problem before I have you try a couple on your own. Here's an example of a problem where, again, they don't give us both subnets and hosts, they simply give us subnets. So they tell us that we need a total of 2 subnets, and that our network address is a 195.223.50.0. So we need to be able to answer the questions about this particular scenario. What I want you to pay attention to is when you look over here in this workspace on the problem, they drew the line between the 4 and the 8, but it said we needed 2 subnets. So I thought that meant I should draw my line for that here. Well, I want you to think back to what I told you at the very beginning of subnetting, that subnets work in 2s, and that the first subnet is always called the 0th subnet, and that you are not supposed to, by practice, assign out of that 0th subnet. It's supposed to be reserved for, you know, what happens if you need some expandability within your network or what have you. So, that being said, that is why you draw your line between the 4 and the 8, because you need 2 usable. If you can't assign out of the 0th, then you only have 1 usable. So hopefully that makes sense. To me, kind of a trick problem, not one that I wanted to make you have to do on your own. So let's go ahead and solve this problem. So we already have the great divine line drawn for us, so we should be able to solve. We know that the address class is, let me write this in here, class C. We know our mask is a 255.255.255.0, and the total number of subnets that we have is here, so we have a total of 4. The total host addresses that we have is 64. We're going to subtract 2 for the broadcast and the host address, or the network address. So that leaves us with 62 usable addresses. We are borrowing 2 bits. And so 192 plus 60, or 128 plus 64 is 192. So our custom mask is 255.255.255.192. Okay, so we only have to create a total of 4 networks, right? Because we only need 4 subnets. So I'm going to count by the binary value of the last bit I borrowed. So the binary value of the last bit I borrowed is a 64. So I'm going to start out with my network address, which is 195.223.50.0, and it's going to take us to, if we're counting by 64s, 192.223.50.63. So remember that we said this is the broadcast address and this is the network address. And then anything in between is what's usable. And I always tell students that it's a good idea to write out the first line fully, and then after that it doesn't really matter. So just so you don't lose track, I guess, of where it is that you're at. That's a pretty poor 0. Okay, so we know that usable then would be .1 to .62. So let's go ahead then and range this out. Because this is network 0, then we're going to do network 1, 195.223.50.64 to 192.223.50 dot what? 127. So our usable would be .65 to .126. So then we're going to do range 3, and range 3, which is number 2. I'm just going to abbreviate. So from this is 127. So then we know 64 and 64 is 128. You can do 127 and 64, which is going to equal 191. And then our fourth, which is going to be number 3, would be 192, to 255. And so our usable for those ranges, here we would have .129 to .190, and here we would have .193 to 254. So those are our ranges. We can't go any further. We're at 255. So now we should be able to come back over here and answer our questions. So the third range, 1, 2, 3. The network range is going to be 192, whoa, I turned it off. 192.223.50.128 to 192.223.50.191. And the network address, I hate subnet number. Network address is going to be out of the second 1, 2. So network address right here, 192.223.50.64. Again, you can track this. So we're taking a look at the third is going to come from the second right here. So that's why this is the answer here. Then as you're taking a look at it, again, here you want the second. So that one takes, this is the second 1, 2, and matches it up right here. The next thing we need is, what is the broadcast address for the first? So the first is actually the 0th, which, we're not supposed to assign out of, which we wouldn't be because it's a broadcast address. So this first one would go here, which is 192.223.50.63. And then what do we have assignable out of the third? So we're looking at this right here. So I'm just going to abbreviate it. It would be .129 through .190. And so again, that one comes out of the third as well. So the ones that I'm going to have you do aren't as challenging as this one, but I just wanted to show that to you because it makes you think a little bit and put some troubleshooting into play.